Hey, we'll see how I do today. I'm feeling a little bit rough, but we're going to talk about research methods. It should be pretty straightforward. Some of y'all have already had me, so it'll be a rehash a little bit. But when I talk about research methods, I usually talk about these two different categories, basic and applied. Applied means you're using something. Okay, so basic research is about a general understanding. So basic, general, and it's usually done in a laboratory. Now, applied research, since you're using, like we use psychology, is usually done in the real world, and it's for solving a specific problem. So that's where kind of consulting and things like that come in. I don't want to go off on that, but make sure you're familiar with the difference between these two. Now, the other thing, if we were in class, I would go off a little bit more on is the difference between quantitative research and qualitative research. So quantitative has that root quantity in there. And so quantitative research, I could say, for instance, with your height, you're 6'8". I can specify or quantify your height. But I could also say you're very tall, and that does say something about your height too. And so my example usually is this. A person has red hair. It's like, well, what's the number? You can't quantify that sometimes, right? But it doesn't mean that they don't have red hair. So some things we have to be qualitative about, some kinds of research, and other things, of course, we're quantitative about. So the very first area that I'm going to go through, I think, will quantitative research. And that's why I have these cutesy little numbers on here, because you can always put it into numerical form. And I think that's why we consider it scientific, because we can, graph it and put it into chart form and analyze it and do all these different statistics on it. Now, if I showed this right here, there's three different kinds of quantitative research on this particular page. The first is naturalistic observation. I love monkeys and especially orangutans. And so here's a baby orangutan. And so a lot of field researchers observe animals in their natural habitat. I love David Attenborough and, Planet Earth and Blue Planet and all this other kind of shit. That's naturalistic observation. We can do that with people. You kind of got to be sneaky and not let them know you're observing them, just like with the animals. But we can do that out in the world. Some research is survey research. You've had to do a survey before, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? But sometimes on the survey, like for the survey, maybe for this class or something, is what would you do to improve this class? You're not going to write down 57. You're going to say, well, but that's words, and that's qualitative response. The third is correlational research, which is how do two things relate to one another, X and Y. So I'm going to give a little math lesson, but I'm going to make it real simple. And so on the next few slides, I'm going to go through correlational research. Okay, here's where I'm glad they're on the computer because I can draw a correlational coefficient. R is represented by the letter R, I should say. And R can range from a -1 to a +1 with 0 in the middle. 0 right here means no relationship. So if R equals 0, that means X and Y aren't related. Okay, so here's how I teach it. It's kind of a bad way to teach it, but this is true. If it's 1, that's a perfect relationship between X and Y, and so they're 100% related. Let's say you had an R of 0.7 over here. It's not like they're 70% related, but I'm going to kind of teach it like that. Okay, we could get into R squared, but I'm not going to go there today. Now, I know this all seems confusing right here, so fuck this shit. Let me get off of this. Here's an X. How much do you spend time studying? Right here, that's X, right? And here's Y. What's your test grade? Those two things better be effing correlated. Otherwise, you're in bad shape for this class. Okay, and so I made some phony data. Every one of these dots represents a person. So see, this person right here studied 2 hours, and then they made a 60. Okay, so that's the correlation between two for that person. Now, this whole other people that studied 2 hours are right in here. Okay, so let me get this off of here. Now, you can see R equals positive 98, so 98%, almost 100% correlated. You can see the trend. But this is a bullshit chart. Why? Because there's some people that don't study at all and make a fucking 100. and other people that study a lot and they make a bad grade. So I made the data be perfect. Now, why is it positive? For instance, as studying goes up, so does my test grade. And as my studying decreases, so does my test grade. They follow one another. That's the positivity. Now, here's another example. Dang, the PS5 is fixing to come out. I should have got on that shit. Okay, anyway, it's a whole other thing. But I don't know if you're a gamer. If I spend a lot of time gaming, then maybe my test grade, see, X, Y, goes down. Now, see, here's where negative starts to make sense. As one thing goes up, gaming, the other thing is coming down. I can't do this right, but they're seesawing with one another. And so here it is. As my gaming goes up, see, they're not following each other. They're seesawing. So all that the negative does, they can still be R equals a -1 or a +1. -1 just says which direction do they go with one another. I hope that that just made sense. Now, the last example I have is right here. What is your body weight and what is your test grade? X, Y. These two things had better not be correlated because otherwise I would be a weightist. You know what I mean? It would be ism. It's like, no, you can be real heavy and make a bad or a good grade, and a real light, bad or a good grade. And so there's no relationship, and that's why it's almost a zero. Now, sometimes, especially in this class, we'll look at relationships. One of the relationships we could look at is that of testosterone and aggression and say, oh, look, because they castrate animals, take away their testosterone, or inject them with testosterone, they get more aggressive. So they do all these experiments, but a lot of times there's other factors, okay? And you're really tempted in correlation to say, see, testosterone caused aggression. Or if I don't play video games, I get a good grade on the test. But what if you just sit on your ass and don't do anything and also don't play video games? You're not going to get a good grade on the test. There's other factors. So this is why they say correlation does not mean causation. Now here's the easiest example I have. I stole it from Eric Haas. Here we go. These two things are correlated. As ice cream sales go up, so do the number of drownings. So then, if I said X causes Y, now with studying in my test grade, that makes sense. But if I say this X right here is causing this Y, then I'm going to have to go out and have this whole campaign against ice cream because people are drowning because they're eating ice cream. Now that's fucking bullshit, you know what I mean? That's not what's happening. See, there's this third factor. It's called the sun. And see, the sun makes ice cream sales go up. It makes drownings go up. Why? Because people are in large bodies of water. The two really aren't related, but it's driving this spurious relationship between the two. I hope I just made sense. Okay, I was on a roll there, but we're going to go on to the next section, I think. Okay, I hope you're still with me. I was getting tired there for a minute. Anyway, number 4 is experimental method. Experimental method is supposed to make up for all the inadequacies of the previous methods because we had this cause and effect thing going on that we couldn't determine in the correlation, ice cream and drowning. And so usually, again, we're coming back to X and Y. How does X influence Y? And when I talk about this, in the real world, there's all kinds of other things going on. For instance, what if X is, how much do you play video games and Y is your test grade? And so you go, see, I'm not playing video games at all and why I'm not making 100 on the test. It's like, yeah, but there's another variable called, did you study? You know what I mean? So there's all kinds of different, are you good in that subject? There's a bunch of different factors that could affect your behavior, which would be the test grade. So in an experiment, I can kind of control those. In the real world, there's all these like suns, like ice cream sales and drownings, right, out there that I can't control that might be causing Y over here. And in the laboratory, you can kind of turn those things off and say, okay, let's turn all that off, control for all these extraneous variables out here. Now we can say, hey, yeah, studying does cause you to do better on the test. Okay, so now if I get off of this slide for a minute, this is a scientific method. Don't write this whole thing down. I do want you to remember hypothesis is a prediction right here. But in all, experiments, you have a prediction on how it's going to go. I don't want to get into the null hypothesis and all this bullshit. But anyway, you test out your prediction in your experiment. So what does that mean? Well, here in psychology, we observe people. Maybe I observe that people get angrier when it's hotter. And then I do some background research on heat and aggression. And then eventually I say, hey, if the room is hotter, maybe that people will be more verbally aggressive in that room than in a colder room. I want to test this out. You test it out a bunch of times, and it starts to work. And then you start to develop a theory about heat and aggression. Okay, so that was simplified. Now, let me see what I got on here. For the test, no, independent variable versus dependent variable. Okay, so here's why it's dependent. An independent variable is how I treat you. Okay, and a dependent variable is the effect of this treatment. Because your behavior is dependent upon what I did to you. Now, what does all that bullshit mean? Well, if I shine a light in your eyes and you close your eyes, you wince like that, blink, your blinking is a function of what I did to you. It's dependent upon the fact that I shone the light in your eyes. I got to choose to treat you a certain way. Why? Because I'm the experimenter. And I treat groups in certain ways, hot room, cold room, and then I see the effects. Did they act aggressive or not? Now, hopefully that all made sense. See, you now have a cause, because I'm pretty sure the reason you blinked over here is because I shone the light in your eyes. Now, you could still have hidden variables even in experiments, if I can get all this pen off of here. Oops. Like the sun, from Ice Cream Sales and Drowning. Like, what if I was shining the light in your eye and the sun came through a window all at the same time? It's like, come on. It's like most of the time you're controlling for there's no light in the room, right? So hopefully some of that made sense. Now, this is my example where I usually go off. I hate Big Pharma, even though I'm a kook and I have to be on Big Pharma sometimes. But if you work for the evil empire of Big Pharma, they want to get that dope on the road, right? They got to sling that dope. So let's say I have two different pills that are supposed to cure a certain disease. They're not going to cure disease because they don't want to cure you, right? But it's going to treat a disease. And so we have to do testing. And so we go through testing in a scientific way. I use this example because it's easy. So we're going to create different groups of people and treat them different. What are we going to do? In group one, I give a sugar pill or a placebo. They think it's a pill, but it's really nothing. It's a blank. Group two, I give them drug A. In group three, drug B. Now what do? See, I have it on here, all cutesy-fied right here, so we can keep track of it. See, right here, there's nothing in this one. It's empty, a blank. But I want to see what would happen if nothing, right? Compare it to nothing. Now, this is sometimes called the control group because it's a comparison group, the benchmark. And against that benchmark, I can see over here, is it A or B? Which drug is working better? So we're going to look at that in this experiment. So the treatment, if I have this on here, is the independent variable, and that is just simply which pill did I give you? I gave different pills to different groups. That's what makes it a variable. If I gave the same pill to all the groups, it would be a static, but it's not static, it's variable. Okay, so now that I treat you a certain way, what I'm going to do is see the effect of this treatment. This is why this is the simplest example. And what the F does that mean? Did you get better? Simple. Okay, treatment and effects. And so if I can get off of this one as well, I made this phony data up, but if I have the sugar pill right here, the empty, the blank, well, for some reason, this guy's a blank too. We can throw all that guy away, you know what I mean? We don't need to invest in this, but we've got a cash cow right here. Okay, so hopefully this example makes sense because to me, the reason it's the easiest is I treat you by giving you a pill and then I sit back and watch and see what it does to you. Okay, I want to go on to the next section. Okay, finally an interesting study to talk about. This is one of my favorite studies. Matson in 2000 went and collected a lot of pictures of men and women. And then he brought him into the laboratory. And then what did he do? Well, his independent variable was the picture that he showed you. Now, some of the pictures were clearly male. Some of the pictures are of people that looked clearly female. And some of the pictures were of people of my favorite ilk, the people that looked androgynous. Okay, this reminds me of growing up in high school. It wasn't cool to be femme in the 80s as a boy. Now, what does Madsen do? He asks people. He shows them one of these three pictures. That's the treatment, independent variable. And then he asks them, are these people straight or gay? This is me. It's like everybody's like, you're gay and you just don't know it, because I was real girly in high school. And I still love things like arranging flowers, and I like doing makeup on people and things like this. And it's like in the deep south, it's like, dude, that's gay. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't care. I'm gay-ish. But just because I don't know, I have some feminine qualities, that doesn't determine my sexuality. We'll get into this a lot more on a later lecture. Okay, enough about that one. Okay, some issues to consider with the experiments. I'm going to get through this as fast as I can, but anyway, we create groups in our studies. I mentioned this with the drug example. Well, what if those, like, I don't have three groups on here, but what if I had two groups and I compared drug A versus drug B? What if I had inadvertently put all the old people in this group and all the young people in this group? And then I say, see, pill B is sucky, pill A is great. And you go, well, maybe it's because young people heal easier than old people. See, you didn't shuffle the deck. You should have had an equal number of young and old people in both groups. And then you could say if pill A worked better, it's because of pill A. That's like the sun. I don't know if that made sense, but hold me honest on that. Now, generalization is when we find something in the laboratory and we want to say, hey, that's the way it works in the world. This is my really pet peeve on the news. They go, oh, this study found that so-and-so, causes cancer. Well, let's do a thorough review. You don't just go do an English paper and have one citation. If 100 studies say that, but sometimes people say one study and then they'll go hog wild and say, we got to shut everything down. It's like, yeah, wait a minute. Come on. We need a lot of evidence. Okay. Now, something that is relevant to this class that has to do with random assignment is this idea of quasi-experimental designs. I know this is a little out of order, I think, from your review, but there's these weird experiments, and it's relevant to gender, called ex post facto. What does that mean? After the fact. I think that's what it means. Anyway, when you come into the laboratory and say, I'm going to randomly put you in group 1 or 2, but what if my study's about gender? I can't randomly put you in group 1 or 2. If you're a male, you're going to grow in group with males, and a female in the group with females. It's pre-selected, So it's ticky-tacky idea, but the idea is that, well, you're not truly shuffling the deck because the deck was already shuffled to begin with. I don't give a shit about that, but it's out there. Okay, so next thing. We have to keep your results a secret. You have to give permission and kind of know what the study's about as you're getting into it. These are just general things about experiments. And a lot of times we do deception in psychology because we want to know how you would really act. Now, one of my favorite people is Borat. Do y'all like Sacha Baron Cohen? I think Borat 2 is coming out. Love Borat. Why? He deceives people into acting like themselves. Booyah! It's so awesome. That's what is genius. But if I deceive you, Borat doesn't debrief. He never comes out of character. At the end of the psychology study, you have to come out of character and say, this is why we fooled you, because we wanted to see how you would act without knowing what the study was really about. Okay, why would we try to fool people in a psychology experiment? Like I mentioned before with the Borat example, it might be a bad example, but he tricks people into acting like themselves. And that's why we would do it too. Because sometimes in a psychology experiment, you get in there and go, I'm in a psychology experiment. What do they want? I bet you they want me to put gay on the androgynous picture. So every time I see one of those pictures, I want to just put straight to fuck with them. So see, their expectations start guiding, the way the experiment comes out. You need to have them in the dark. That's like a tell in poker. You don't want people knowing what your cards are. You want to pretend like you have shitty cards, right? And so in the same way, you don't want your, participants really always knowing exactly what you're studying. Later on, you will have to debrief, but in the moment, you kind of trick them into acting like themselves. Okay, I think the next thing is called experimenter expectancy effects. It's one of my favorite things because even Einstein said just by observing, the experimenter changes the nature of the experiment. I mean, because he becomes another variable, so to speak. Now, this is based on like this little tale. There's a professor, and he gives to his students 2 boxes of mice at the first of the semester, and he says, "We're gonna do a study because I want to verify my hypothesis that these mice are smarter than these mice. How would I know? Well, we genetically bred these mice, to be smarter. So I just want to verify my genetic breeding is right." So I'm going to give them to the student. He gives them to the student and say, "Hey, over the next, 16 weeks, do the testing, time them and see how fast the smart mice and dumb mice run their maze, and then get back to me so that we can, write it up, and get it into a scientific journal." Okay, so he does the testing. 16 weeks later, the student comes back. He's so excited. He said, "Hey, I did this." If you're in statistics, you could do a t-test, right? "Look, it's significant. I got a significant value. It's like, yes, your genetic breeding program or hypothesis was proved." And then the professor says, "That's funny because I just randomly put mice in those 2 boxes. So you treated them differently based on the label." Here we go. We're fixing to get good, you know what I mean? Because later on we're going to talk about labels. Because like a lot of times you find what you're looking for. He expected the smart mice to run it faster, and he probably subconsciously spent more time with them, was more patient with them, was less patient with these guys. Look at these dummies, put them back in the box faster. Didn't even think about it, but that subtle edge led to a confirmation of the theory they wanted. We talked about this with social constructionism, right? Okay, so when we get into confirmation bias, I love it because you find what you're looking for. And we start to do this in the form of self-fulfilling prophecies. Once I label a person with a stereotype, especially for this class, right? Straight and gay. Are you straight or gay? It's like, that's why I want to say queer. Fuck you. I'm not straight or gay. And I'm not bisexual. Just like, fuck you. My personal theory is everyone's bisexual, but whatever. I've done too much Molly. Now, yeah, I said Molly. You know what I mean? And I'm also a Catholic who smokes weed, but I'm not, that doesn't make me a bad teacher, you know what I mean? Or love Jesus any less. But with this self-fulfilling prophecy, when you start labeling people, I'm a social psychologist and also teach psychology of religion, you start treating people different. I grew up in the deep south. I don't talk like this for nothing. There was a train track and black folk live on that side and white folk live on this side. And if you were gay, you shut your fucking mouth because you would get beat up. Okay, so now that you treat people different based on this label, okay, their reaction confirms the original label. What does all that mean? Well, let's say we go to a party. I say, "Hey, dude, you're going to meet this dude, Greg, here. I hope your name's not Greg." You know what I mean? But if it is, I'm sorry already. And he's a dick. So you got a label, dick. Okay, so you're at the party and you see it's like, there's that guy, he's a dick. So you treat him like you're like, "Oh, hey, what's up?" You avoid eye contact, you're not very nice, subconsciously. And then what happens? He's like, "What's the fuck wrong with this dude?" And you bring it out. Self-fulfilling prophecy, you create it to come true, just like the smart mice. Okay, you can see why like this. Now, why do I have this on here? Because I teach psychology of religion, and I'm also a big old tripper, but I love Don Miguel Ruiz, the 4 Agreements, and so he talks about people being black magicians and white magicians. Not like his grandfather where you're doing all the sorcery with the psychedelics, but he says what magic is this, and I don't want to go into like scripture right now, but every human is a magician, and we can either put a spell on someone with our word. In the beginning there was the word. Oh my God, I want to preach right now. Or we can release someone from a spell. I don't want to start crying either because we cast spells all the time with our opinions. So see, you can either condemn other people or you can bless them. Like if someone's struggling and you see them over there, it's like, look at this motherfucker. I just saw this homeless lady, and a lot of people just drive by her. It's like, oh, she's doing this, she's manipulating me. I just looked at it, it's like, doesn't look like she's having a good time. I can just pray for her. You know what I'm talking about? Because a lot of times the spell is this way. You're a black magician because you're talking shit about everybody, and you're talking down on them. And when you condemn, you are condemned. You live a condemned life. But when you bless other people with your words, even your enemies, then you live a blessed life. And that's what the Sacred Heart of Christ is about. And I don't care if you're not a Christian, that's just what I am. Give a fuck if you're an atheist, be a good atheist. You know what I mean? But a white magician will bless other people. And what does Don Miguel Ruiz say? He says this. We cast the biggest spells on ourselves because we talk shit about ourselves or we build ourselves up. And I tend to be in the first category. And it's so hard to cast a good spell on myself right here and call myself a smart mouse instead of call myself a dumb mouse and make it come true. That's me. My name's Tim. That's who I am. Okay, so these labels, that's the thing. Like you said, we cast the biggest ones on ourselves. Stop condemning yourself. Stop condemning others. Qualitative research. Next one, and we're going to be done. Sorry. Sorry. That's who I am. Qualitative. Red hair. Remember? You can't put it in a number. You could, in an HTML programming or something, with those weird numbers, but whatever. You wouldn't understand it. So, qualitative research, I have 3 simple kinds, and we're done for the day. But ethnography, I graph out an ethnicity. And so what does this mean? Well, I study people like Margaret Mead. We talked about her before, right? Right? I think I'm having like deja vu. She went and studied like the Toda and the Manu and the Chambuli. We did this on the introductory lecture. And so she went and lived with those cultures, right? And then she wrote the books. She didn't have any fucking numbers in the books. Well, maybe a few, but she didn't do any studies and charts and t-tests and all this bullshit. But when she found like only men like playing with babies versus what do you do in America, right? Or only men did the dishes versus in America. This, contrast, comparative analysis across cultures was very rich, but it only had words. Okay, so that's one kind. I like it because the people that immerse themselves, if you're in my other class, in cults and gangs and like whatever else, military groups, case studies. Case studies, let me see, focus on how I change over time. So think about it as a caseworker. I work with an individual all the time. I say, are you getting better over time? If I was a therapist, if you keep going to your therapist over time, you're a case study and they're looking at you. It's like the first day I met Tim, the 47th session. You know what I mean? Is he any better? That's my problem with therapy because I'm not. You know what I mean? It's like, God damn it, I'm paying for this and I'm not better. And it's cost a lot of money. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's a case study. It could be like a doctor too. I think I have a doctor on here. He's a case study. It's like I go back to my doctor over and over. I was just at my ear doctor, ENT. They look at it. Is it getting better over time? But a lot of times if I went to my doctor and I asked him, or I use a mechanic as an example, I go to my mechanic and he says, there's something wrong with your fuel system. It's like, well, can you make that a number? And he'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. WTF? Fuel system? It's like, yeah, but those are words you're using. I want a number because that's science. Like he would be like, okay, dumb, get out of here. It's like, so a lot of times, it doesn't make it not true. If I go to my doctor and he says I need a root canal, and I go, well, can you make it a number? It's like, Tim, you need a root canal. That's scientific. It's just a word. I'm sorry, anatomy, the whole class is scientific, but it's all words. Okay, one and I'll be done. Get off my soapboxes. Interviews. This is my problem with the news. I think they should call the news the interviews, especially CNN or Fox. It's like, get the fucking people off of there. Just report the news and I'll decide how I feel about it. First of all, don't get me started. Why do we have a Republican news station and then a Democratic news station? Where's the independent news station? Oh yeah, that's NPR. but I don't want to listen to it so boring for me personally whenever I listen to sports radio. Okay, so these experts, they bring them on TV. Okay, we brought in 17 experts and they're going to all tell you what you're supposed to think. It's like, well, can't I tell myself what I'm supposed to think? Okay, whatever. Um, that's the whole idea, that the expert's opinion is better than yours. They have a better pair of glasses. I was looking for that. I thought it was going to come up a little bit earlier. But, if I take my car to the mechanic again with that example, it's like, oh, he gets a better pair of eyes. I just had to do it, is what I keep saying that. And I'm going to have to trust him because I'm not a mechanic and I don't know the first thing about it. Okay, that's the end of research methods. The rest of the class is going to be a lot more exciting than research methods. So I will see you next time.